Hello and welcome to Broadsword Wargaming. My name is Oliver.
My name is Ciara, and today we're going to be painting Horus Heresy Legions. Not just Horus Heresy Legions. Every Horus Heresy Legion. All X amount of them.
The Horus Heresy is packed with some of the most iconic colour schemes in the Warhammer universe. So in this video, we'll explore the best ways to bring those legendary designs to life on your models. Taking inspiration straight from the stunning artwork in the books, we'll aim to stay as true to the source material as possible, whilst also experimenting with a few fresh techniques along the way.
In this video, we are going to be trying to figure out the best, most efficient, easiest, but coolest looking way to paint each Horus Heresy Legion. Because if you just got the new box, you're going to have, well, like a lot of Space Marines to get through. So you want to make sure they look good, and you want to make sure you're not there for like 6 years trying to paint them.
Yeah, I think we'll split them 9 and 9. Makes sense. And there's some I've never tried before, so for me, it's going to be quite exciting, to be honest, to paint things like the Thousand Suns, where I've never had the opportunity to do so. But painting one of them could be pretty good. So cherry red is what we're going to go for.
For what?
Thousand Suns.
Huh? Yeah. I don't know my Horus Heresy Legions.
Surprise!
I'm excited because I get bored very easily, so one of each is going to make my life a lot more interesting. I think for Space Marines, I tend to focus on like the after effects more than the armor. Do you know what I mean? Like your like scratches and pigments and stuff like that.
Glowy bits.
Yeah, but I'm going to try not to rely too heavily on that and just focus on what's the best way to get the armor done. And I don't think I'm going to use the airbrush either. No,
I think we'll try and keep this video as open to everybody. I will say though, I think the airbrush is the best way to paint any Space Marines, especially an army of them. But spray cans can be used a lot, and I think we're really going to utilise that because some of these are a lot easier than others as well. Like if you want to just get a Legion done, I don't know, paint Iron Warriors, right? If you want to be miserable in life, paint, I don't know, something difficult.
What's difficult?
Nothing, because we're going to show you how to do them easily. That's what we're going to do. So yes. I've got 18 Space Marines lined up, covering every single armour mark available. Rather than sticking to just one style, I thought it'd be far more interesting to show off the differences between each version and give you some practical tips on how to paint them. This video is all about keeping it simple and straightforward, so we're using mostly Games Workshop paints since they are the easiest for most people to get hold of. Spray cans are going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for these schemes, making them super practical to replicate on the scale you'll need for your Horus Heresy games. So with that said, let's jump straight in. The Dark Angels were the first Legion embodying secrecy and discipline from their Primarch Lionel Johnson. Renowned for their mastery of combined arms and knightly traditions, they stood apart as aloof warriors who kept their true purposes hidden, even from their allies. I started with a solid black base coat, then added a zenithal spray of standard grey from Colourforge. The real trick with painting Dark Angels or any black armour is not to lean on pure black. For the metallics, I used lead belcher on the trim and smaller details, then broke up the scheme with Mephiston red on the bolt gun to add a bit of contrast. I picked out the cartridges with a touch of Runelord brass before washing all the metallics heavily with Nuln Oil. To deepen the armour and give the grey some life, I layered on 2 thin, watered down coats of Nuln Oil across the whole model, making sure not to let it pool or to touch it once it began to dry, which helped avoid streaks. After that, I moved on to the details, adding highlights with lighter greys and brighter metallics. Once transfers were in place, a blast of satin varnish tied the scheme together and gave it a nice finish. It's a straightforward approach that makes it easy to get an army done quickly, especially since most of the work is handled by the sprays. If you prefer a darker tone, just switch to a deeper grey spray at the start.
Led by Jagati Khan, the White Scars embrace speed, freedom and ferocity, favouring fast-moving strikes and hit-and-run warfare. Is it Jagati Khan? Jagatai Khan? Anyway, moving on. We started off priming this with grey and white rattle cans to give it a zenithal effect, and then we went straight in on top of that with some Basilicanum grey. I use this quite thin, and I have to work fast because otherwise this is going to leave streaks and pools. Apply it, move on. Then, for God knows what reason, I decided to do these little lumpy bits on the pauldron before putting on the base coat, which is going to be red. Huge mistake, but I'll come back to that in a minute. I used Mephiston red for this backpack, which I think is really nice contrast to the white. And then I dry brushed back the armor with just a plain white. I think this was actually a Vallejo white that I used to bring the armor back up because I thought the whole thing was looking a little bit grey. Carroburg Crimson was the wash I used on top of the red to dull it back down. It also gives it this really rich sort of hue, which I love. And then I have to work around the knobbly bits here like some sort of idiot, but I'll go back and fix those up afterwards. Fill in all your details, lead belcher and black and brown. I usually use contrast paint for the backs of the legs because it just flows in that little bit easier. And I'm highlighting back up with the original Mephiston red. The Caraburg crimson, dulled it down, darkened it up, whatever way you want to say it, so I can use the original colour as the highlight. And then I'm trying out the new AK, I don't know if it's new to me. It's AK Pin Wash. I didn't varnish this or anything before, but it still has that nice capillary action and was super easy to use, and I think gave a really nice finish. Then we used a satin varnish over some transfers and nice basing, and it looks great.
Pragmatic and unrelenting, the Iron Warriors excelled in siegecraft and attritional warfare. Under Perturabo, they became masters of fortification and demolition, sacrificing glory for grim necessity. Now this is a really straightforward scheme. I started with a lead belcher spray as the base, then lightly dry brushed Iron Breaker over the armour to help pick out the edges and give some definition. Next, I applied a diluted coat of Nuln oil across the whole model, letting it sink into the darkest areas and separate the panels. For the trim, I used Retributor armour, then painted the shoulder pads with Black Legion contrast before shading the gold with Agrax Earthshade. I also worked a little Agrax into random spots on the silver armour to give it a slightly dirtier, more worn look. Once all of that was dry, it was just a matter of highlighting the silver and gold with brighter tones to make them pop. To finish, I sealed the model with a satin varnish, though you could go for gloss if you prefer a shinier metal effect. The only optional step is hazard stripes. I don't think they're necessary for basic line infantry, but they do work really well on larger armour panels if you want to add extra character to the scheme.
The Imperial Fists under Rogel Dorn were paragons of loyalty, fortitude and defence. I could not wait to try painting out the yellow armour on the Imperial Fists. We started out with Mephiston red and a white rattle can over it to make it nice zenithal. A lot of people use pink under white, which is perfect as well. We just didn't have it, so we went with red. Then Imperial Fist yellow contrast, whack that over top, and it just looks amazing straight away. I decided to wash it in some watered down Nasdrag yellow. In hindsight, I think sepia would have worked as well, but I used Nasdrag yellow because that's what I had. I just used some black for the trim and some lead belcher for the details as well. And then we were going in with some Rogel Dorn yellow. You can also use ice yellow from Vallejo, which I use all the time, and then any grey to highlight the blacks. Then I decided, you know what, let's make some chips in the armour. So get that same ice yellow, Dorn yellow colour and just paint on some pointy chips and some little circles, and then just go over the top with Rhinox hide in the same shape but slightly smaller. Such a great and easy way to add chips. Then we varnished it with satin varnish over some transfers, and this is just, I think this is my favourite.
Perfection defined the Emperor's children, moulded by Primarch Fulgrim into paragons of martial artistry and beauty. They prided themselves on flawless execution in war and culture alike, embodying the pursuit of excellence. I started with a black spray undercoat and followed up with a strong angled zenithal of white scar spray. For the armour, I went straight in with Luxion purple. I applied this to an airbrush, although you don't need to for this one, I just wanted to show you the variation. With all of the purples established, I picked out the studs and key details in Retributor armour, then painted the metallic areas with lead belcher, and finally used Black Legion contrast on the bolt gun casing. Once all of that was dry, I gave the whole model a wash of thinned down Nuln oil. Yes, you'll see quite a lot of that in this video. It really settles into the recesses and deepens the shadows. For highlights, I layered up the armour with Genestealer purple, adding a little white to the mix to push the edges brighter, and then finished the metallics by sharpening them up and lifting the gold to Liberator gold. After that, it's just transfers, a few lenses and a satin varnish to pull it all together. The end result is a bold but straightforward scheme, quick to reproduce across a whole army, and the deep purple finish gives it a really striking look for any chapter running this colour.
The Salamanders, led by Vulcan, embodied humanity and compassion amidst the brutal Imperium. Artisans and warriors alike, they believed in protecting the weak and wielded fire and craftsmanship as symbols of their character. I started out with a simple black base coat, and then after that we're going to go straight in with a couple of coats of Nocturne Green. Just slap this on so you get a nice even base coat to start with. It will look kind of dark, but we're going to dry brush on some brighter green to brighten the whole thing up. I started out with Caliban Green and it was still looking kind of dark. I don't know why I'm beating the crap out of it with the brush. That is aggressive. Then went over with Warboss Green to brighten up a little bit of the high points. Bealtan Green, again, I just whacking green after green after green on this. Then an extra little coat of black contrast paint on the pauldrons from where I overspilled my dry brushing because I was so aggressive needlessly. The trim I am doing in Retributor Armor, which I think looks super nice against the green. And we're going to highlight up the green armor with Moot Green, which is super bright, but that's kind of what I wanted for these guys. It's a little bit different to what I was doing before. My favorite wash to put over Retributor Armor, which is Guilliman Flesh. I never really saw the appeal of Salamanders until I painted this one. I actually think a whole army of these would look amazing. But I can see how a lighter yellow gold would also work with these. I'm not sure. What do you guys think?
The Death Guard under Mortarion embraced endurance, attrition, and resilience above all. They waded into the most toxic grinding wars, unflinching in the face of suffering. Now, I've been really looking forward to this one, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I started with a Wraithbone spray base coat, then added the green details using, believe it or not, Death Guard green. For the metallic trim, I went with Runelord brass. I painted the bolter casing and any areas that would later be lead belcher with black contrast. At this stage, I decided to clean up any overspill using Wraithbone, which I would recommend as it does save time a little later. Once that was done, I applied lead belcher over the metallic sections, and then came the secret ingredient, AK Interactive Streaking Grime. I covered the entire model with it, working it into all of the recesses. It looks a bit intimidating and it's kind of scary, but it's surprisingly simple. After letting it dry for about an hour, I used a cotton bud to wipe away the excess, leaving the recesses filled with a grime for a great weathered effect. If it's being a little stubborn, a touch of odourless thinner, since it's not water-based, works perfectly. Taking time and care here really pays off. The next day, I went back in with Wraithbone to pick out the edges and added a few highlights to the metallics. And just like that, it's done. The result is a fantastic scheme achieved with a really straightforward process that looks, to me, incredible. I'm planning to paint my Mortarion this way, and I'm tempted to find an excuse to do even more Death Guard. It's simple, effective, and looks top-notch.
The Alpha Legion, under Alfarius, and possibly Omegon, were enigmas wrapped in deception. Masters of infiltration, subterfuge, and misinformation, they operated through hidden networks and manipulation, rather than brute force. I decided to try a nice metallic finish on this, so we're going to undercoat it with a good spray of lead belcher from a rattle can, and then apply a Keelan green, I think it's a Keelan green all over. Super heavy, try and avoid any pooling, try and avoid any streaks, work quickly. We're going to use lead belcher for all the little details. And then we're going to add some highlights and some scritchy scratches using, actually it's a mix of lead belcher and Stormhost silver, whatever you think looks better. And then fill in all the details, the blacks and the rest of the silvers on the guns, and wash those with Nuln Oil. A gloss varnish really finishes this off over the top of some transfers, and I think a whole army of these would look absolutely amazing. Plus it's quick and it's simple.
The Worldeaters, once disciplined berserkers, were forged by Angron into gladiatorial killers. Their butcher's nails implants drove them to uncontrollable fury, transforming them into engines of slaughter. You've seen Ciara's take on white, but here's how I would tackle that armour. Start with a grey base coat, then work up to a white Zenhull highlight. Spray cans are perfect for this. For the shoulder pads, I sprayed them with the Crag Blue separately, then glued them on after. Next, good old Nuln Oil. Thin it down and apply it over the entire model, letting it naturally settle into the recesses. If you want a stronger shading, apply a second layer in the deeper recesses. For the trim, I used Runelord brass because Khorne loves brass. Grab a sponge and dab pure white across the edges and across some of the flatter areas. This creates highlights while adding a bit of weathering. Then, using a brush, carefully pick out edges with pure white to sharpen the definition. Once that's done, fill in the details carefully and wash the brass trim with Agrax Earthshade. For even more depth, I added a pin wash of straight Nuln into some of the darkest, easiest to reach places. And that's it! Done! A clean, striking white armour scheme that requires surprisingly little brushwork. The key is controlling that first Nuln wash. Nail that and the rest falls into place. Honestly, it's quick, effective and absolutely worth a try. Plus, you can add the blood all you like.
Noble yet cursed, the Blood Angels followed Sanguinius, an angelic figure of grace and vision. They fought with unmatched beauty and ferocity, driven by artistry and the pursuit of nobility in war. Blood Angels seem to have a lot of fans, and I'm one of them, so let's see how I painted this. A black and white zenithal undercoat will give a really nice starting point for some Blood Angels contrast over this. We're going for a mega easy colour scheme for this so you can get it done nice and quickly. Then I went over with Carroburg Crimson. I love that. It just works over any sort of red tones. And then we're going to use black for the trims and the details. And then we're going in with Retributor armor on all of the gold details. I love Retributor armor. It goes with pretty much anything. Highlighting in Wild Rider red. I think I used Squig red first, but I went back over with Wild Rider because I just thought it looked a little bit better. And then I decided to do these knobbly bits silver, and then no, I changed my mind. I think they just look better in gold. I think gold for Blood Angels, right? Yeah, that's much better. Transfers, satin varnish, basing, boom, easy peasy, and they look great. Imagine a whole army of these.
Gifted with psychic powers, the Thousand Sons were scholars and sorcerers under Magnus the Red. They sought knowledge above all else, mastering the warp to wield devastating arcana. I've always wanted to try this scheme, and it turned out really nicely. I started with a Retributor armor spray base coat, then applied 2 thin layers of Blood Angels contrast. If you're careful, you'll find you barely need to do any cleanup on the trim, but if you do overspill, just tidy it back up with Retributor armor paint. The bolter casing was painted grey cere, with all the other workhorse parts done in Leadbelcher. I used a thinned down non-oil wash over the bolter to deepen the recesses, and Reikland Flesh Shade over the gold trim, and in a few of the darker recesses between the red armour plates, to add warmth and definition. Standard highlights go a long way here, and I also added Stormhost Silver to some of the sharpest edges, both for definition and a touch of weathering. Once everything was in place, I gave the whole model a coat of gloss varnish. That made a huge difference, and suddenly I had that rich cherry red finish I was aiming for. Transfers would help break this up a little more, and I think a brighter gold, like Liberator armor, could work better for the trim. If you give it a try, let me know how it turns out.
The Iron Hands. Shaped by Ferrus Manus, despised weakness in all its forms. They pursued strength through flesh replaced by steel, merging man with machine in pursuit of perfection. I love Ferrus Manus. Not a huge fan of Iron Hands, but here we go. Our undercoat here is Leadbelcher over a black, almost like a zenithal. It's silver on silver on silver, so I wasn't quite sure how to make this look good, but the black and Leadbelcher layered made it nice and dark, and it means that we can go straight in with Leadbelcher on the details and it'll look nice and bright and have a decent amount of contrast. Then you're going to go in over that with Nuln all over, every single bit, drench it in Nuln oil, and then highlight in a nice bright silver. This was Iron Hand Steel, I believe, and a little bit of Stormhost Silver as well mixed in. Go over and give them some nice bright highlights, because at this point I thought it still looked a little bit flat. So these highlights are a little bit brighter than I would normally do, but they reflect really nicely. I was desperate to give this any other colour, so we went in with this nice bronzy colour just on the little bullet casings and whatever the heck this is on the backpack. And obviously just go over everything else with Nuln oil. You can't put too much Nuln oil on these is basically what I'm saying. And then you're going to base it up in something bright. For the love of God, put it on something bright to make it pop. But it looks really good. We also did a gloss varnish over this and it just brings it all together.
The Space Wolves, guided by Leman Russ, were savage yet loyal, embodying the Emperor's executioners. Their feral warrior culture blended Fenrisian traditions with brutal effectiveness in battle, thriving on melee combat and berserk fury. Grey Primer is just the place to start. Without an airbrush, which would definitely help this scheme, I built it up by dry brushing progressively lighter greys, starting with Dawnstone and working up to Administratum Grey. Once that was in place, I applied a unifying wash of Nuln oil. Good old Nuln. After the wash dried, I went back in with Administratum Grey to pick out the edges again. For the trim, I used Runelord Brass with Leadbelcher for the metallic details. The bolter was simple, just a coat of thinned black contrast since it already had a solid grey base to work with. I finished by shading the brass with Agrax Earthshade and adding a few more highlights. Now this is a straightforward scheme and very easy to replicate. That said, the Horus Heresy era Space Wolves grey can feel a little plain. If you'd prefer something closer to their classic 40k look, you could swap out the greys for the Fang, Rust Grey and finally Fenrisian Grey to give it that familiar blue-grey tone.
Led by Rabute Gilliman, the Ultramarines embody balance, order and reason. Their meticulous organisation, discipline and adaptability made them the most reliable, oh my god that's really hard to say, reliable of all the legions. I'm not going to refilm that, just use that one. Basing in Macragge Blue, of course, this is available in a spray which makes everything super duper easy. And then I kind of wanted to keep this the same way they recommend painting Ultramarines to beginners, so we went over with Nuln Oil. It might be tempting to use something more blue, but I went with Nuln over this. And then Retributor armor can't be beat, so we're doing that on all the little details. Fill in the rest with Leadbelcher. And then you can use Hoeth Blue or any other light blue to highlight the high points. I like a nice bright highlight on my Ultramarines. And then Nuln Oil. Nuln Oil everything. When in doubt, put Nuln Oil on it. And then another satin varnish over the transfers here. The transfers really make the difference, I think, on Ultramarines. They really give it that little bit of extra something something. But yeah, I'm super happy with how these turned out.
The Raven Guard under Corvus Corax specialised in stealth, sabotage and precision strikes. Masters of guerrilla warfare, they prized freedom and liberation, fighting wars to break chains as much as conquer worlds. Now, as part of my Isfan series, I've painted a lot of Raven Guard, usually with the airbrush. This time though, I wanted to try a simpler approach. Starting from Chaos Black, I gave the model a strong zenithal highlight with Colourforge's Raven Black. Metals were picked out with Leadbelcher, while pipes and cabling were done with black contrast, just to differentiate from the armour. On the shoulder pad, I added weathering by sponging on white, and then sharpening the edges with a brush. For the armour highlights, I just worked up through progressively lighter greys. After applying transfers, I finished with a satin varnish, which subtly brought out the blue tint in the Raven Black spray. This is a really quick, straightforward scheme, and while I think the armour benefits from a lighter grey applied with an airbrush, I'd still be more than happy to put these on the table.
The Luna Wolves, later the Sons of Horus, were the Emperor's favoured legion, led by Horus Lupercal himself. Charismatic and decisive, they embodied unity and conquest, their victories forging much of the Imperium. A black and grey zenithal gives the perfect base to go on top with Lupercal green. I swear this is almost Lupercal green in itself. It's just a little bit darker. So a couple of thin coats of Lupercal green will get you started off with a nice even base coat. And then Nuln Oil over the top to get in all those recesses and make the rest pop. Then a dry brush with Sons of Horus green. This is actually the first time I've successfully dry brushed something, and I'm kind of addicted, so now I'm going to do the rest of my army this way. Plus, who doesn't love the Sons of Horus? Liberator Gold is what I chose because I'm in love with the colour of it, but the coverage is crap, so you are going to need like at least 3 thin coats of this to cover. Then I actually went in with Vallejo Verdigris, but I think Sybarite Green or something similar would work for the highlights on this, but the Verdigris is nice and bright. A little bit of Agrax over the Liberator Gold. And then transfers, and then a satin varnish. I love these guys. I will be doing the rest of my army this colour.
The Wordbearers, guided by Lorgar, were zealots who sought meaning in faith. They worshipped the Emperor as divine, and when spurned, they turned to darker gods. I started with a black base and then a grey zenithal undercoat. For the armour, I used Gal Vorbak Red. It has a slightly brown tone that really suits the Wordbearers colour scheme. All the metal areas, including the studs, were picked up with Leadbelcher and washed with Nuln Oil, along with the grey-black areas. Once that dried, I gave the red sections a wash of Cowbird Crimson, hoping to deepen the armour into a rich wine red. For the highlights, I worked up with Corn Red, adding a touch of white to the mix on the very sharpest edges. The metallic trim was highlighted, then I finished the model with transfers and satin varnish to knock back the sheen from the washes. Honestly, the black and grey zenithal did most of the heavy lifting for the black sections. I only needed a little extra null to deepen a few shadows, which saved a whole ton of time.
The Nightlords, moulded by Conrad Kurz, spread terror as a weapon. They ruled by fear, breaking enemies psychologically before the first blade was drawn. We based the Nightlords in a simple black undercoat and then went straight in with Nightlords blue. I think it would be rude not to use Nightlords blue with a Nightlord. A couple of thin layers later and we've got a nice even base coat to work with. Null Noil as a wash all over. That will darken it down a little bit but still let that nice blue through. And then I chose a Runelord brass for all the trim and all the details as a nice complementary colour. Then it came time for the lightning. Now, do not judge me. I did not use a reference photo and I forgot what lightning looked like and I painted it upside down, okay? But the next one and the one on the pauldron turned out fine. Pick a few different blues in a gradient and finish off with a little bit of ice yellow mixed into your blue. Just make sure that your first blue that you put down is super watered down and the lines are really thick, and then each layer go up in brightness, less watered down, i.e. more opaque, and a smaller, thinner line, if that makes sense. So you're getting smaller and brighter as you go and finishing off with a dab of ice yellow.
And there we have it, 18 Horus Heresy Legions all painted in different schemes. It's been a really fun video trying to figure out different ways to do things, and it's actually taught me quite a lot. Some of these I think came out really well. The Imperial Fists, the Thousand Suns, the Alpha Legion. Are you looking to paint a Legion? Are you going to try some of these schemes out? If so, let me know down in the comments below, and I'd love to see your guys' takes on these as well. If you want to support the channel, please do make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the alarm bell. Check all the links down below for things like Patreon, where you get access to a private Discord, and all of the other usual good stuff. With that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video.